And Al Wunsch, let me go to you on this one, please. This is one of those where so many years passed, and suddenly the state's able to execute, multiple search warrants, recover all sorts of different things, come forward with these charges. But still, the story is unclear to the public about what happened to Kristen Smart and by whom, really. Your thoughts on that and how this cold case affects both the state's case at this juncture and the defense for these two individuals?
Well, I'll tell you this, it's a mystery to us too, because they've been very, very secretive with regards to the evidence that's been set out. They're using an eyedropper to put out what they've got. There's been no, slam bam evidence that I've seen as of yet. They've got a case that is going to have to be very deliberate because they don't have a body. So it's a jigsaw puzzle. They're building a jigsaw puzzle very slowly. They're putting the pieces together, and they're going to hope for a conviction. They've got a problem with no body. They've got a problem with 26 years down the line. And so there's a number of issues that come into play, and questionable evidence from what we have seen thus far. I mean, blood residue, but they're not sure it's human blood. They're not sure it's her blood. I mean, so there is stuff that is going to be very difficult to create the mosaic that they have to create in order to get a conviction in this case. But they're doing it in a very slow, deliberate way. And it's the only way you can do it on a case that's got, that kind of teeth, 26 years.
Right, Al, right. Darnell Crossland, let me go to you on this one, please. We know that there's a gag order in place on this case, and our Matt Johnson has been asking everybody, for information, right? And those who are parties to the case, witnesses to the case, can't answer, but of course he's still trying. He saw Ruben Flores tonight after the testimony had concluded for the day. He waved at him, asked him if he would testify. The lawyer said they'd decide last minute about whether or not he would be testifying. Ruben is not accused of the murder. Ruben is accused of being an accessory after the fact, perhaps in some cover-up that the state is alleging here. As Al pointed out, the facts are all still pretty unclear. But what do you think about the idea of Ruben Flores testifying? Couldn't this hurt his son if he does? I want your thoughts as a criminal defense attorney, please, Darnell.
Well, thank you for giving me that question. I was hoping I got that question. It's not only a good question, but it's an easy question. And as Al said, this whole thing has been coming through like a slow drip in terms of what comes out. I totally object to the idea of a gag order. I believe in total transparency. It's not an issue that if there was no gag order, the jury might be tainted by the public coverage, because there is public coverage. So I'm against the gag order. But as to your question specifically, the rules are normally, if it's a close call in litigation, I think that the defendants or people on their behalf should testify. In this particular case, Paul and Ruben should not testify, because as Al said, it's an old case. They have no body. They're trying their best to pull together a circumstantial case. And the only thing that testifying can do is help give these people more than they have. So now this is not one of those close calls where I normally tell my clients, go ahead and testify, let the jury know what happened here, try to pull it together if you can. Not in this case. They have nothing, let them proceed with nothing, and don't testify.
Agreed. Well said, Darnell. Jennifer Brandt, I want to pick your brain about these juries. This case is unique, and that Her Honor is allowing two different juries. So the state has joined these two, father and son, in the criminal prosecution. But we know they're facing very different charges. Paul Flores' charges are far more serious. He's being accused of doing the murder. Ruben, dad, is being accused of helping son cover up the murder. With the juries, I'm really curious, and nobody's been able to see the juries yet. We know our Matt Johnson's been looking for them, but because of the way they're being shuffled out and they've got most of the media in the overflow room, it's been hard to get a look at them, but eventually we'll be able to. But I wondered, when you're picking the juries, I'm curious if Dad's jury is skewing older. I want to get your thoughts on who you might want on those respective juries if you're representing either of those defendants, please, Jennifer.
Yeah, well, that's a tough one because, they're hearing all of the evidence. And I think that's what's most interesting about this, because both juries are hearing the whole story at once. And so they can't help but, kind of putting it all together. Now, will that hurt, the cases, especially for Ruben Flores, because they're going to hear all of this testimony about Paul Flores and how his relationship was with Kristen Stewart, et cetera, et cetera. So, does that affect the father if people are starting to put it together and say, maybe he did do something, was the father involved? I think it's hard to separate out the cases. But in terms of who should be on the jury, it's very hard to say.
And let me clarify, please, Jennifer, before you go any further, and I'll go back to you and let you answer about who you ideally would want as a juror. It's my understanding the reason is that because the jury hearing Paul's case, hearing Ruben's case, the dad's case, could be, tainted by a lot of the bad facts from son's case. They're not hearing everything, is my understanding. It's my understanding they're being taken out and brought back in. That's what I was told. Somebody please correct me on that if I've gotten some wrong information, but our cameras aren't in there, so we can't even see this and verify, but it's my understanding that's why, to your point, Jennifer, so that otherwise it wouldn't make sense, right? You just have the same jury. This is why the judge has separated them. But
I just heard there's so much, I heard there's so much shifting around in terms of people moving in and out and different, getting in and out of there. So it makes it, I think, difficult in even handling the case.
Oh,
but
sure.
in terms of
who you want on the jury.
Who you want on the jury.
Okay,
I mean, I think for the father, you want maybe an older group of jurors, who might be more sympathetic to him, who might kind of feel for him. He's a dad, kind of protecting his son. For Paul, maybe younger men, certainly not women. I don't think you want on this jury if you had a choice, because they're looking at him and saying, hey, this is some guy maybe caught in a bad situation. So I think that's what you're looking for ideally.
Exactly. I was thinking maybe younger college age guys for him, and then parents for Ruben. That's who I would want.
Or even older, senior citizens.
Jennifer, thank you.
I tend to go with women on these cases more, but I'll tell you, I'll leave it at that.